I'm Heather Martinson. I'm glad you could be here today, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you today about reading, about strengthening reading skills. But first, a little follow-up from our last assignment, which was about projects. What projects were you able to do with your kids? Did you get a chance to, are you doing the Alice in Wonderland theme, and what projects are you doing that relate to that theme? I recommended a few different ones that relate to the caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland. And so I'm wondering if you did any of those. In particular, did you do any experiments with growing your own metamorphosis animals such as mealworms or butterflies? Anyway, today's topic is about strengthening reading skills. And let me share my screen. Here we are. So this strengthening reading skills is this and the following two sessions are all part of step 4 in the Reignite Learning System. So step 4 is reading, writing, and math. And these are the basics, right? A lot of times we just call them the 3 R's, and they're the most basic things that we want to make sure that our children are learning. And that, as for a lot of people, that's the only thing they care about as far as an education goes, because if you these things, you can go far in life. So, but I want to point out, though, that the purpose for teaching these things is not so that they can keep up with all the other kids. The purpose is so that your children have confidence and competence in these areas that are so important. And I want to point out that also, if you're working one-on-one with your child, it is far more effective and powerful than if they're sitting in a classroom with 20, 30 kids. You can be right there with them to help them if they get stuck on something or if they have any questions. This type of learning is extremely powerful, and you don't need a teaching credential to teach your child how to read, especially when you're sitting there one-on-one with them. It's so good. And you know what they're capable of, what your child is ready to learn. You don't have to stay and wait for the rest of the class to catch up, but you can go ahead and move forward as soon as your child is ready. And it doesn't take forever. It doesn't take 6 hours a day to do these basic skills. It's maximum an hour and a half a day. If you're going more than that, well, you shouldn't. Please don't. Because if you spend at the most a half hour on each one of these things, that's plenty of time. Some people believe that the amount of time that a child should stay on task is equal to 1 minute per year of their life. So say a 7-year-old can only do reading or math for 7 minutes at a time. So that's something to consider. And as long as as long as you're touching on each of these things every day, they're going to be moving forward. And again, because you're working one-on-one, that even those little 7 minutes together is a lot more time than a teacher in a crowded classroom would be spending with the child. So you're going to, even though you're spending less time on schoolwork, you're going to be able to help them engage and move forward at a much faster pace, even when you're doing it for less time. So I promise, don't work on these things more than an hour and a half a day. It's like beating a dead horse when they're not feeling like it and they're not wanting or interested in doing it. Of course, if they are interested, I have had kids that just like, you can't stop them from reading. You can't, and another child of mine that just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote it compulsively even. But so those are the things that you can allow your children to do if they're interested. But as far as requiring them, keep it simple, keep it meaningful. But reading is the most foundational skill, because if a child knows how to read, then they can teach themselves anything else. So it's important to make sure that to get that foundational skill. So that's why we're talking about reading before the other two. So working on these skills daily is, like I said, it's something you'll want to touch on every day, but still keep it simple, keep it easy, keep it fun, keep it lively, keep it interesting, keep it relevant. All of this reading can be learned through relevant, meaningful approach. It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be hitting them over the head saying, sit down and you can't get your dessert until whatever. You don't need to but if in the right light, children are going to really enjoy reading. And I'll tell you about how it does vary from child to child, and we'll touch on that later. But the number one thing is that you need to read to your child. If you're not reading to your child, you're already, that it means you're behind. If you're looking at keeping up with everyone else, the number one thing you need to be doing is reading to your child. So, and if life is crazy, everything is falling apart in your home, and all the only thing you can get to during the day is a bedtime story with your child, you will have had a good day. I'm telling you right now that the most important thing you can do with your child all day, education wise, is reading to them. So let's see. Oh, I want to tell you the story. A friend of mine, it was over 25 years ago by now, but she was diagnosed with cancer and she was going through chemotherapy and she was homeschooling all four of her children. And it was a very difficult time in her life, but and she didn't have obviously she didn't have a lot of energy and but she chose classics to read to her child so she could lay on the couch. She even admitted sitting in the tub and reading to her children. And that was it turned into really a bonding experience between her and her children, especially at such a difficult time in her life. Her children were not held back. They were just fine. They're all adults now and they're doing great. So, and she survived cancer. She beat cancer. So she's still alive and kicking and doing great too. So anyway, but that was the important thing. Because it was a scary time in their lives, but they had reading together. And it was just an excellent, wonderful experience together. So I recommend reading actually multiple times a day. I had a teacher one time brag to me that she reserved 20 minutes a day for her students to read. And I'm thinking 20 minutes a day, that's all? Because my children would read as long as they like. I had a kid that would just couldn't stop reading. He just loved reading, but that I had the they all knew that they had the opportunity to read for as long as they like. It wasn't just like, oh, here's your carved out time. But anyway, for reading to your child, I started reading to my kids, each of them, when they turned 1 year old. It was kind of like a birthday present. They got to choose the books, and it was just a great experience. And we'd usually do it both at nap time and as they were getting ready for bed. As my kids got older, we no longer did nap time. Well, except for I had basically an older set and a younger set of kids. When the younger kids went to bed, I would read with my older kids because then we were able to read a more difficult text together. But bedtime was always the whole family. And we usually read chapter books. And these were adventures that we would share together that would last, depending on the book, weeks, sometimes months, depending on our life too, what's going on in life. And we don't always have time to have the typical bedtime. So just wonderful experiences, spending time and sharing experiences together as you read to them. And might I say, you might have noticed that I was reading to all my kids, right? So the older set and the younger set together at the end of the day. So I was reading to kids that, yes, knew how to read because, again, it was a shared family experience. And yet, even when they were teenagers, we would still have them in and we would read stories together. We read so many great adventures over the years, and I'm going to share some of those with you in a bit. So, when they're little kids, you can, as you're reading stories to them, point to the words. At first, when my kids were little, I would point to the pictures. And then over time, I'm like, why am I pointing to the pictures? They can see the pictures. They're familiar with what things look like, but they don't know the words. And so in order to reinforce what the words look like and sounds that each word make, I started pointing at the words instead. And of course, that's in the picture books where the words are pretty big so that they can see them and become familiar with them, and over repetition, help them learn. Let's see. Another approach to take so the reading is the foundational skill, and reading to your child every day is something you don't want to miss. It is the one thing you do. If there's nothing else you're doing, if you read to your child, you will have had a success day. So moving on, and a couple other approaches you can take is creating a print-rich environment for your child. This is for a child that is learning how to read, and you can label things all over your house, at least in their bedroom. Put them in the kitchen, wherever you like, but put the words, but the names of things, and put them on those things. And you'd be surprised at how much kids will learn just from words on things. And when I was a child, before I was in school, I learned how to read the word stop because there was a stop sign at the end of every street and I could read and I knew my letters and I sounded it out and I read the word stop. And that was a big accomplishment for me. At Disneyland, one of my youngest, when he was, I don't know, 3 or 4, there was a big sign that said hot. It was talking about coals. It was one of the rides. Big sign that said hot. And he read it. He looked up and he said hot. And I'm like, I didn't even know he could read. But because the word was big, because the word was on something, it was obvious, he learned to read that word. So don't discount the value of labeling things. And it doesn't have to be just simple words. On this image here, there is the word blanket. That's not a word that you usually start with, but children are capable of learning even difficult words at a young age, especially when it's a sight word. They can just go ahead and see that word and know what it is. So go ahead and make a print-rich environment for your kids that are learning to read. Another approach, and I recommend using real books instead of textbooks for your kids. You don't need a reading curriculum for your children. I use Dr. Seuss books for my kids, and we had such a great time. But I love their ABC book. It's a lot of fun. The next one here is Bob Books, which is a series of early reader books. They're adorable and enjoyable. So again, it's not a textbook, but it's a real book. It's not a worksheet. It's something that the child can enjoy reading, and there's cute little pictures and stories to go with it. As they get a little bit older, if you want to work on phonics with your child, you can actually get reading books that are phonics, that they focus on just one sound at a time in an entire book. And I'm going to share one of those with you in a little bit. But so there's that. And then of course there's picture books that you're going to want to read and look at the pictures and point at the words in the book as you're reading along. Then as they get older, once they know how to read, you can read chapter books to them. I can't tell you how many kids I've known that have been reading chapter books with their mom, and just mom only has so much time to read, and so read something and it's like, okay, I need to go work, I need to go make dinner or whatever, and leaves the child and the book, and then the child sneaks and reads the next chapter or two because they're so interested in what's going to happen next. And this is a child who would say, I don't want to read. Don't try to teach me to read. But then they go and read these chapters. And the parent, of course, she knows what's going on. She's in the kitchen. She probably planned this whole thing so that her child would have that drive to want to read. My nephew, Nate, was one of these, I believe. So this was fun. Anyway, we read all the Magic Tree House books. We read the Chronicles of Narnia. We read Holes. Wonderful experiences. And some of them have some very philosophical discussions that came out of these books because of the content in them themselves. So a lot of wonderful opportunities for reading. So beyond the books that you're going to naturally want to read with your kids, I want to point out that we have our theme for the whole year. Every year, you can get suggestions for books that you can read that go along with the theme. So working with the theme and just making it more interesting and a richer opportunity for your kids when it relates back to the theme. So another approach is, we talked about strewing a couple back in, I think, session 3, about having opportunities for there's books around that your child might want to just pick up and read. We always had, our entire living room was lined with bookshelves. Probably if looking back, I wouldn't do that again, but I would have actually just select few books out at a time because the books, they mostly just sat on the shelves. If I get them out, they're more likely to read them. So that's strewing, right? So have a few books out and ready where they're sitting on the couch and they pick it up and start going through it. Whether they read it, the words, or just look at the pictures, it's just fine. Also, it's fun to be part of a group. It's fun to learn with other kids. So you might want to consider starting a book group with a couple other families. You meet once a week or once a month when you finish the book, whatever, and discuss it or do some little craft that goes along with the book and some refreshments just to make it more fun. Anything you could do to encourage the kids, especially if they know the book group is coming, they're going to need to finish the book before they see their friends. So an incentive for them to get the reading done. And of course, there are many places to get books from. My number one source was always the library, but I often would have a book subscription. All the Dr. Seuss books that we got was from a subscription where we would get 3 or 4 books a month that came automatically. And sometimes it was really hard to pay that bill, but it was important enough that I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of books around that our children loved. And so we had that subscription for several years. Of course, bookstores. There are still bookstores that you can visit and let your children pick out a favorite book from time to time is a lot of fun. And if you get on their email list, Scholastic has a warehouse sale 1 or 2 times a year, and where you can go in and buy a bunch of their books at a discount. So I recommend that when you have the opportunity. So now I'm going to tell you about how my kids learned. Each of them were individuals. So this picture is my husband and I, along with our 4 children and our 4 grandchildren and a daughter-in-law. So each of my kids learned in different ways. Each of my kid was an individual. And so I'm going to just start with the oldest and go on down. My oldest was actually very typical. I was not as confident as a homeschooler when my oldest was young. And so I went ahead and used a curriculum for my oldest, and my oldest learned in the typical way. And that's the end of the story for that one because it was just typical. My second, though, what it is dyslexic. He still is. You don't grow out of it, but he had a hard time reading books. He did learn at the typical age, but yet it was harder for him. And nevertheless, when he was a teenager, his favorite author was Steinbeck. I'm not even interested in reading Steinbeck. To me, it just, I don't know, it doesn't sound interesting to me. But he chose that classic and he hung on to it and read several books by Steinbeck as a teenager. So I think that was great. My third child, he was afraid to read. He was intimidated by it. He thought it was hard. He didn't even want to try. What's interesting is I knew that he knew how to read. I knew that he understood how to make those sounds, how to make it make sense. But yet he really, really resisted until he was 10. This kid, he was so stubborn in this way. And I was adamant about allowing my children to learn at their own pace. And so even though it was hard for me to see him push away so much, I never that you just have to read now. Again, I knew he knew how, but he would never just pick up a book. He was still really struggling. He was just like, he would avert his eyes. It was really hard for him. But one year when he was 10, we went to the library as usual, and it was summertime, and it was a summer reading program. And you get a stupid little pencil or eraser or something if you read so many books. And he decided that he was going to do it. And so he did. And what's interesting is when he started reading, he started on A to Z Mysteries, which is an early chapter book. He did not start with Dick and Jane. He didn't start with Bob books. He started with chapter books because as a 10-year-old, those are the things that kids are interested in. And he devoured the entire series, and he went on to devour several other series, including the entire Harry Potter series, which by the time he turned 11, he had read a stack of books taller than himself, and he is my tallest kid. What's interesting is to this day, he is my most read, one of my children that has read the most. He became such a voracious reader that he used to set his alarm for 5 a.m. to get up early to read because he knew we didn't want him staying up late. So he would like, well, no one's going to complain if I get up early. So he set his alarm for 5 a.m. to get up and read. I mean, that's how incredible he was, just like into reading. And again, I wonder if I had just said, you have to read, sit down, shut up, look at this thing. If I had actually forced him to learn like all the rest of the kids, would he have become a voracious reader? Or would he have been just back even harder? Would he have decided, well, I'm not a very good reader and I'm not even going to try? So it was difficult for me to watch him and wait for him so long for him to start reading. It was, I consider, a win, because he became such a voracious reader. And not only that, but at one point He wanted to be an author even. It was great. So my youngest taught himself to read when he was 4. I couldn't stop him. He would be like, we would everyone would go to bed and I'd hear a noise out in the hallway. He's there in front of the book cabinet or the bookshelves, and he's turning pages and reading books. I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, go to bed. But and then he really interested in books. He was primarily nonfiction. This is the kid that in an earlier session I talked about how it was Harrison. He was at 7 was interested in learning all about the elements and all that went with that. And so that was really exciting. So that's my kids. And just so I just wanted to share those stories because I want you to know that there are all types of learners. There are all types of readers. And we should not be pigeonholing our children. We should not be saying, your age should ... right? We need to allow them to learn at their pace and to follow their interests, and those meaningful learning experiences and the reading, make it personal to them and make it something that they choose to do and want to do. That's that story. And of course, bottom line is I want you to enjoy reading with your kids, seeing them learn, seeing them books and getting the most out of it. It's just such a wonderful chance for you to connect with your kids, to have the best deep discussions over the things that you're reading about, and just have fun and enjoy the process. So that is the presentation. And I want to show you off of there. I want to show you some of the books that I used over the years. And of course, is the Dr. Seuss's ABC book. Great because it all rhymes and it has lots of repetition. So and the opportunity for you to point to the letters on the page. So when they're learning their letters, you can go ahead and point to the big Q and the little q and let them say what the letters are. And then you can read the rest of the page. And if you want, you can point to the words as you go. Next favorite Dr. Seuss was Hop on Pop. This was a great one for starting as well because it has, again, a lot of repetition with the same sounds. Red, Ned, Ted, and Ed in bed, right? And you can have the children. What I did with this book, a lot of times, I had the children read the big words and I read the small words. So I would point to he, me, and encourage them to read he, me. And then I would read he is after me. Him, Jim. Jim is after him. So these, I don't even know where you can get Dr. Seuss books anymore. A lot of places that I looked for that book group that I was in when my kids were young and I couldn't find it anymore. You can buy some Dr. Seuss books at bookstores. I don't know if you can find the entire series and buy all of them like I did. Here's another one for once they're getting a little bit advanced. There's a Walk It in My Pocket. Something I love about Dr. Seuss is because they all rhyme. So that's the kind of house I live in. There's a nink in the sink and a zamp in the lamp. I would end up doing is I would have the children guess what the word is going to be. So I would say a zamp in the, and I would point to lamp and see if they can sound out and say lamp. And because they have the clue of the picture and they have the clue of zamp, a nonsense word, but it's going to rhyme with lamp. And they're familiar with how this book goes. They start picking up on these cues, and then and so they can say the words. There's a bofa on my, and let the child read sofa, right? It's a lot of fun. And it's just, again, it's an interactive experience that you're having together and having a great time. Now, a lot of people say you should not ignore phonics because kind of like a key to learning, right? That it's easier for them and they'll learn better. I've really bounced back and forth. For the most part, I've been whole word because that's how my children learned. And even Harrison, when he learned to read, he said the E at the end of the word makes this other letter change the sound. So I identified that. He was even able to verbalize that. So he understood phonics, even though I hadn't taught it to him. Anyway, but there are so many great ways to do phonics as well. I bought a couple. This one is a Disney Princess phonics books, a whole pack of books. There's 12 books in there, and each book focuses on a different sound. Disney Junior phonics. And one of the books I just want to show you for an example. One is a Lion King little book, and its focus is on I um it's on the so again, it's roar. Keon yells, and then yells is in bold. Yells, helps, helps his friend. And it's interesting too because sound is represented different ways. I mean, yells, helps, and friend that all make the same sound, but they're spelled differently, right? So the child gets the opportunity to see the same sound in different contexts. And again, there's some, if you wanted to, I would point to all the words, but if you're reading to the child, you can maybe help them sound out the ones that have that sound, right? So it's a, and then it's a story, and it's something that they enjoy. I had a kid who was not one of my kids, but one of the in one of my classes. He was crazy about Star Wars, and everything to him was learned through the context of Star Wars. So I bought a pack of books like this that was all Star Wars, and that's how he learned to read. I mean, from book one all the way through, there were multiple of books, Star Wars phonics, and that's how he learned how to read. It was all phonics. I mean, Star Wars for him. So it was a lot of fun. It was fun to see him learn, and he did it quickly too. He just like through those books because he loved them. So taught himself again because he was reading those books, and he did an excellent job. I want to reconnect with that kid. I know his mom, and I'm like, it's probably one of the kids that are just doing fabulous things right now. Anyway, is it so for assignment for reading? Of course, if you're not already reading to your child every day, start now. You probably already have books in your home that you can start with right now. Don't have enough, go to the library, whatever you need to do to keep a collection of books in your home at all times, and strew those books around, or at least in certain places that your child is likely to be hanging out, and have the opportunity to just plain pick up a book and start reading. Along with the Alice in Wonderland theme, see if you can find books that complement Alice in Wonderland. Of course, books on animals, or are a lot of new versions of books that like new Alice in Wonderland type stories. One of them that my 10-year-old that learned how to read later, the books that he devoured, or a series of books, was Looking Glass Wars by Frank Bador. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but the Looking Glass Wars. It's a little bit for an older kid. That's not for a little kid, but something that he really enjoyed. It's a whole different take and a mystery on Alice in Wonderland theme. So that'd be fun. Also, if you are reading the Alice in Wonderland book already, or if you already did read it, watch the movie, and then have a discussion with your kids and compare. Oh, there's several different Alice in Wonderland movies, but compare the book that you read to the movie that you watched, and see what the differences are, and maybe decide why you think the maker decided to make those changes. So is your homework, and I'm going to bid you adieu. Our next session is on writing. So we're going to go over how to help your kids learn to write, and how to help them enjoy and make the most out of their writing experiences. All right. So I look forward to seeing you then. Bye.